first time that I stepped into an actual classroom with a teacher and other students, I was 17, and it was Biology 101 at community college. I had been homeschooled from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. And no, I did not get to do schoolwork in my pajamas. Homeschoolers get a bad rap, and it's not too hard to see why. There's this thing that happens when you have a term that applies to a group of people, and that group of people is behaving in a range of ways, and some of those ways are all good, pretty cool, and other ways are not so great, a little bit black. Inevitably, the negative side of that range becomes the stereotype, and everyone on the positive side of that range will spend the rest of their time under the umbrella of that term, promising people that the negative stereotypes don't apply to them. This happens with many, many terms. But we aren't here to talk about that. Homeschooling has a lot of negative stereotypes. Homeschooled kids, or adults who were homeschooled kids, are generally assumed to be at least one of the following: uneducated or unintelligent, extremely socially awkward, in a cult. Even the most common question that homeschooled kids get asked implies a devil-may-care, lackadaisical attitude towards education. Do you get to do school in your pajamas? Why was that always such an exciting concept to kids? These stereotypes persist because they are so often accurate. I was homeschooled all the way from preschool through graduating high school, and I am one of these things. Wanna guess which? How dare you? It's a little crazy that parents can just choose to not send their kids to school in this country, legally. On the one hand, I think it's kind of a good thing. Public school isn't a great situation for every kid. And by the way, I'm gonna use public school as sort of a blanket term for any out-of-the-house, legally established institution of education in this video. Basically, I just don't want to have to keep saying public and private school. We had a friend who started going to public school in 9th grade after being homeschooled before that, and she immediately underwent a ton of bullying. We had a friend who begged his mom to let my mom homeschool him because he had such extreme test anxiety that he would vomit before every exam. I had a friend who switched to homeschooling for her last 2 years of high school because she was just so over the drama of public school, and she wanted to actually focus on her education and her future. Public schools in America are not well suited to every child and their learning style, or at least not every public school is prepared to handle any type of child. On the other hand, it's kinda bonkers that parents have the legal right to keep their children away from everyone. Choosing to homeschool doesn't just mean you're in charge of your child's education, what they learn, when they learn it, and what biases their learning encompasses. It also means you're in charge of essentially all of their time. You have the ability to limit what humans they are exposed to and interacting with. You potentially get to control all of the media they consume. You have a lot of control over their everyday lives because there are no teachers, no coaches, no counselors spending large amounts of time with them. Now, obviously, this is not the agenda of every parent who chooses homeschooling for their kids. Once again, it's a negative stereotype that absolutely is true. This does happen, but it absolutely is not true of everyone. Many homeschooling parents may fall in a sort of middle zone here, which is where I would guess that my mom fell, or actually, I know that's where she fell based on things that she said. She didn't lock us up at home and keep us away from all other humans so that she could control every bit of information that came into our brains, but was one of the reasons that she pulled my older siblings out of public school, that she didn't like the kids they were hanging around or the lack of control she had over what was being taught in class. Yeah. Definitely. So stereotypes 2 and 3 come from this idea that as homeschoolers we have rather limited, or sometimes very, very purposely limited, interactions with human beings outside our family. Stereotype 1 comes from the many varied ways that parents can go about providing at-home education for their children, or not providing education. Because again, we don't have a lot of laws about this in America, as far as I know at least. I do remember my mom talking about a couple scares they had over the years when homeschooling regulations would come up again in local or state government or whatever. I do think a social worker showed up at our door once, although my memory of that is of the story, not of the occurrence, so iffy. But if a parent decides to not educate their child or to leave out large parts of education, who is there to advocate for that child? Not every kid is going to stand up for themselves at that age and say, no, I want to read, or please let me learn all of science. But if they find out later in life how much they never learned, they might be pissed. Justifiably so. It's like the age-old piano lessons thing. Kids never want to take piano lessons when they're kids. They whine and complain about it. But as adults, they're usually grateful that their parents made them stick with it and they can now play an instrument. I'm the kid who did want piano lessons and was never able to have them and is sad about it now. Actually, my dad at some point started giving us music lessons. Every Sunday night, all 7 of us, yes, there were 7 kids in our family, would sit down together for music class. He was a musician after all. He had a BA in music and he played trumpet professionally before marrying my mom. So grand, right? What a handy thing to have. I thought we were going to learn to play music on the keyboard that we always had stashed in the closet. I did not know that music theory was a thing. He was teaching us music theory. Bless him, there were 7 of us spanning a 15-year age gap, and no one wanted to learn about circle of fifths. After a few months of this, we basically went on strike and convinced our mom to make him stop the music classes. And I feel bad about that to this day. What an ungrateful little horde we were. Of course, then I ended up going to college for musical theater, which required 2 semesters of, you guessed it, music theory. Y'all, the information that came flooding back into my brain when I was taking that class, 'twas incredible. The professor started talking about circle of fifths, and I was like, I know this. How do I know this? I think I was maybe 10-ish during my dad's music lessons, but it was all still back there somewhere. Made an A in both music theory 1 and 2, and I texted my dad to say, thank you for teaching us. I'm sorry we made you stop. We were a bunch of shitheads. I don't think that was verbatim my wording, but that was the sentiment. We'll get more into the homeschool versions of extracurriculars later, but back to my current point. Homeschooling is a lawless land, and as such, the range of behavior under that term's umbrella is rather long. There are many, many different methods of homeschooling out there, numerous styles and techniques. And then on top of that, there's all the different people types. The parents, the kids, the teachers that they hire. Yes, there's a version of homeschooling where you hire teachers. They're all going to be different, and that's going to affect how well the homeschooling goes or works. For example, in my family, we had my mom pretty much solely in charge of the teaching. There were certain things that my dad did, but it was a small amount. And sometimes we mutinied and took his duties away. But we never did co-ops or anything where another person was brought in to teach us. Not as long as I was in school. The thing is, my mom didn't really teach us at all. And she was very open about this, even to us. She always said that she hadn't gotten a very good education herself, which may have been further motivation for her to give her kids something different since she went through the public school system. The crucial thing she was in charge of was not teaching itself, but rather choosing what we would learn and with what curriculum. She chose our books, and the books did the teaching. So that was our method of homeschooling, book learning. And I'll go into exactly what that meant for us in a minute, but again, we had one person in charge of what we learned and how, and 7 different people learning. All 7 kids underwent the exact same method of homeschooling. For some people, homeschooling allows for individual methods of learning catered to a specific child. Not so much for us. And being siblings does not make us at all alike in our learning styles. We vastly varied. I thrived under our learning system. At least I thrived in the learning and grades department. Because I was a child who liked to be in control of myself and do things my own way, but simultaneously had a very strong need to follow the rules and meet or exceed expectations. Learning at home worked well for me. But there were downsides in other areas. The answer was 2. And we all suffered in this department. It's impossible not to when your main and sometimes only interaction with children your own age is once or twice a week at church, where our family had, shall we say, an impenetrable reputation that wasn't exactly helpful for connecting with your peers. But even here, there was range. Some of my siblings are more extroverted and better at being around people. Some of us, not so much. And I don't really want to go into detail about their various relationships with our education system at home. I try not to talk about or for my siblings in videos because that would be kind of weird. But suffice it to say that some of them struggled a lot more with our system, yet it was never really adapted to better fit their needs. Therefore, it would be understandable and not at all surprising if some of them have a much more negative opinion of having been homeschooled than I personally do. Just like public school isn't always a good fit for every kid, neither is homeschooling. And when you've got 7 students and no variation in method, it's not gonna work well for all of them. Like I said though, there are so many different methods of homeschooling. You might hire a tutor who's a skilled or even licensed educator themselves and can oversee all the various subjects that the kids are learning. You might take part in a co-op where several homeschooled families group together. They might have some subjects that their students learn at home from books, and then they might bring all the kids together once or twice a week in a rented space or just one house to learn specific subjects from a hired teacher. For example, if you have 8 families who all have at least one child within the high school range, you might decide all together to hire a calculus teacher this year, and then all of the kids who are in the 9th to 12th grade range will group together to take calculus class. I believe there are other co-ops that kind of do the tutor thing. One teacher or even a parent who has a professional education background will oversee the education of multiple families of kids. Then of course you can register for streaming classes where you basically go to public or private school but online from home, much like everyone did during the pandemic, but you know, by choice. And I'm sure there are many other methods that I don't know about or, you know, don't even want to know about. Y'all, I recently heard about unschooling and like, that made me sad. My mom definitely did not take her choice to homeschool her kids lightly. She put an insane amount of time and work and effort into it, really trying her best to make sure that her kids got a good, if rather religiously biased, education. It helped a lot that she was an exceptionally organized person who ruled a rather rigid roost. We had structure, y'all. We had so much structure. We went to school Monday through Friday from fall to spring like all the public school kids. She did tend to start our school year a week or 2 later than public school normally would because she found it ridiculous that summer ended halfway through August, but on the whole, we would get pretty much the same holidays that all the other kids did. We were required to get up in the morning, get dressed in appropriate clothing, have breakfast, and start our schoolwork immediately. And we had assigned desks in our office and kitchen where my mom could kind of keep an eye on all of us throughout the day. With the exception of breaks for mandatory Bible study, PE, yes, we did PE, it was usually an exercise tape in our living room, and lunch, you were expected to continue working until you finished your assignments for that day. And this is where you'd get a lot of variation among the 7 of us. Assignments were done the same way for each kid, the same amount of work given to you daily and weekly for each specific grade. So what I was expected to get done on any given Tuesday in 5th grade was the same as what my older siblings had done and would be the same for my younger siblings. Some of us could get this work done pretty quickly, even before lunch, while others would be working all the way till dinner every day or even after dinner. We just had different learning styles, and as we were all learning from books, those of us who read faster or had higher reading comprehension excelled under this system, while others struggled. And I don't mean this to come across as like, I excelled, woohoo! But we're just being factual here. I definitely didn't struggle. This system just worked for me, so much so that by high school, I was manipulating the system to work better for me, which my mom had never allowed anyone else to do. For example, she typically required us to do our schoolwork in the order she had assigned it. I've heard other homeschool kids talk about spending an entire day just doing science class because they felt like it. Absolutely not in our home. I actually just picked up a bunch of my childhood stuff from storage, and I'm pretty sure I have schoolwork examples in there from all 12 years, so I'll have to do some digging and see if I can find examples to show you. Not the American Girl magazines. Oh, y'all. So this is what my mom would do for all of us at the end of the school year. Each of us had one of these books. There's like an envelope for every single grade. Obviously, they would get quite packed. My second grade one has just completely fallen out. But yeah, you had like a little picture of yourself from the year. Oh my God, NIEE was the name of our school. This is what I'm saying. My mom took homeschooling very seriously. She named our school the NEB Institute for Excellence in Education. And when anyone asked us where we went to school, we would say, NIEE. We got report cards every year. We also had school colors, purple and gold, which was ironic because then I went to a college whose school colors were purple and gold. Couldn't get away from it. Conduct, nice and quiet. Yeah, that was me. Just nice and quiet. Oh, so apparently I was in second grade when we did music class with my dad because it's on the report card, so I would have been 8. So besides this, my mom also wanted to always keep representations of our schoolwork every year. So we would also make these at the end of the school year, one for every grade, and it was literally just our work. An example of work from every single subject. You would put in the ones that you were most proud of, and then we would, dispose of all the remaining schoolwork. Oh, okay, apparently we like to keep a lot of stuff, because I've got 2 for a lot of years. My God, y'all. We really saved stuff, didn't we? Oh, here's some of our music work. This is detailed. He gave us pretty tough assignments. My mom made weekly schedules for each of us, which in itself was a huge time commitment for her. These listed out the subjects you were taking in whatever grade you were currently in. Typically math, science, history, literature, grammar, spelling and vocabulary, and art. Oh my God, I'd forgotten this. But yeah, we would decorate our assignment sheets, or at least I would. I don't know if anybody else did. But like when I was bored, and I just needed a break from doing school, I would just start decorating my assignment sheets. We've got a turkey for Thanksgiving, a palm tree, because this was the week before we were going on a little family vacation to Galveston. Please, can I go? What was I asking to go to? She would then assign specific amounts of work to each day for each subject. Once you got into junior high and high school, there was also stuff like government, geography, health, I think sometimes. And then we did also have Bible class most years, which was different than our daily Bible study. Lots of the Bible, y'all. Exploring God's World was the name of our science book in 3rd grade. So, did I mention religiously biased? Math and grammar class usually consisted of doing 2 to 4 pages of work in their respective books, where they would teach you a new concept or set of rules, and you would do exercises to practice them. Science, history, and literature classes usually involved reading a section of the book and then writing out answers to a set of questions at the end of that section. Some short answers, multiple choice, etc., and some essay questions. We had to write these out legibly in a notebook, starting out with pencil and print block writing when we were young. And then I think by 4th grade, something like that, we had to switch over to exclusively writing in cursive. And then in high school, we had to switch over to using a pen and whiteout. Okay, so 2nd grade, I was still writing in print for everything and learning cursive. 3rd grade, we started having to write everything in cursive. Spelling and vocabulary was an interesting course because my mom didn't feel that the books gave you enough work. So we had this system she had created where Mondays you had to just write out all of your spelling words like 3 times each. Write words 3 times each. Words must be spelled correctly. And then Wednesdays, you had to write sentences using each of the vocabulary words. 1 sentence for each word, unless you're me and you like to challenge yourself in a way that pushes the boundaries of the rules, in which case you try your darndest every single week to get all 12 of your vocabulary words into 1 single sentence. I'm not sure I ever fully succeeded in getting all 12 into 1 sentence, but this week I did happen to get it into 2 sentences. I liked to start them with although. It was very helpful for cramming more words in. Here's what I wrote. Although the culprit was prosecuted for the superficial theft, an anonymous benefactor probed into his motives and decided to atone for the man's debt, and therefore the man was acquitted. Gotta say, that's a little bit of a run-on. Sentence 2, although he remained civil at the gnarled old man's remark, a subtle tremor of anger answered the quizzical and mocking grin. There you go. Oh, here's one. I got it all into 1. Let's see how bad this sentence is. My mom did write run on at the bottom. Although she tried to beguile him into compliance with clamorous pleas, he could easily ascertain her preconcerted purpose. This was a manifestation to him, and he conjectured that a strong conviction against her plan resulting in obstinacy would be wise. However, she scoffed his refusal and became quite tumultuous as her mind was turbulent, thinking of a new plan. Oh, Lord. This was like, I had to amuse myself in some ways. I couldn't just write 12 sentences. That was too boring. Good heavens. I had good times in school, y'all. I learned how to challenge myself. We also frequently had quizzes and tests in every single subject, and Mother Dearest was quite strict about these. Oh yeah, she would always write the tests in red so you knew they were coming up. You were allowed to study for a test up until you went to bed the night before. The day of the test itself, regardless of when you finally got around to doing it, you were not allowed to so much as crack the corresponding book. When I got to college and realized that we were allowed to be sitting in our desks in the classroom 2 minutes before the test would be handed to us and still be poring over our books looking at all the information, y'all, my mind was blown. It was actually in the 2nd year of music theory that the teacher took grand amounts of pity on all of her students, and she would literally do a full review of the information right before handing you the test. I still find this hilarious to this day. Like, let's be honest. Testing is a terrible way to gauge someone's actual knowledge. People with great short-term memories are always going to do better. But it's even weirder to me if you're asking people to repeat information they looked at 2 minutes ago. I don't make the rules though. Because of how I was trained while being homeschooled, I never pulled an all-nighter to study during college. Because for me, I thought you were supposed to sleep on it. You were supposed to still remember it after having slept the whole night, right? Anyway, though. So that was a typical day for us in any given year. And as I said, my mom expected us to start at the top of our assignment chart and work our way down to the bottom in the way she'd assigned it. I did no such thing. It didn't take me long to start rearranging my work to better suit my personal style, which is something you can do when you're homeschooled. For instance, history might be 4th on the subject list, but I have a test today, so of course I'm gonna do that first thing in the morning before short-term memory turns to long-term memory and lowers my overall performance. I also started doing all of my reading assignments the night before, so then the next day I just have to do the written work. And then I figured, why not start doing the written work at night too? You have nothing better to be doing. And for a while, I was suddenly doing all of my schoolwork at night, like completing Wednesday's assignments Tuesday evening and so on. So when I got up in the morning, there was nothing left for me to do. There was a brief moment where my mom questioned why I was changing her entire system in a very like, how have I let you get away with this kind of way? But I have been governed by logic literally my entire life, and I used that to my advantage when I was a kid. I simply pointed out to her that my grades were still great, so why did it matter when or how I got the work done? And she had to agree. Also, let's be real, I got away with a lot of stuff as a kid by just being so quiet and invisible in our home that no one noticed what I was doing. Okay, so one other way that I kind of manipulated my way through the system at home using logic. I did not like math. Math was my worst subject. It was kind of the worst for all of us. We really could have used a teacher in that aspect, and it especially always got bad when we got to algebra. Because like sometimes, well, let me put it this way. There are algebra problems that don't have one consistent answer. Like the answer can be different. And my mom had no way of knowing how to grade those, because if you couldn't say like, this is the answer and this is the one you gave and they are the same, then she couldn't tell. Like she didn't personally have any background in math and in algebra and stuff. So halfway through Algebra 2, which was the last math course that we took, I logic explained to her why I shouldn't have to do it anymore. I honestly forget what my argument was, but I succeeded. And she let me drop out of Algebra 2 and I never finished the course. I was sneaky sometimes. And then I went on to test out of math for college. I don't know if you've ever heard of a CLEP test, but it's this test you can take to basically say, I'm good, I already know this subject, and then not have to take the college course. So I did some research and realized that if I took the like core liberal arts college course in college, I had to take college algebra. But by some loophole, if I tested out of math, I only had to take the college mathematics test. And mathematics I could kind of handle. Algebra is where I went way downhill very, very fast. So I CLEP tested out of mathematics and never had to take algebra again and never had to do math while I was in college. So why is math still my worst subject? Gee, I wonder. Though college wasn't highly encouraged in our home, I had decided by 9th grade that I was most definitely going, and I wanted to start getting some of those core liberal arts courses out of the way before I even arrived at university. This is where homeschooling could once again benefit a kid, because for your last year of high school, you were able to enroll for free, if I recall correctly, in college-level courses at the local community college through a program called dual credit. I'm fairly certain public school kids were also allowed to register for dual credit, but I just don't know how that would work with their schedules, and I never met another dual credit kid the entire time I was there, so I didn't get to ask. Essentially, you would just take college courses like any other college student, only you would receive credit as both a high school class and a college class. I managed to get biology, chemistry, history, and English out of the way with this method, and it didn't interfere at all with my regular homeschooling because the year before, I had actually doubled up on work and completed most of 11th and 12th grade at the same time. Anyway, this is starting to feel braggy, but I'm just pointing out that for a child who is good at adhering to a schedule and managing their own time, who's invested in completing the work expected or required of them, and or who likes to be in control of themselves in a very rigid management style way, homeschooling can be a really great situation. What's unfortunate to me is that I put in all this work to manage my schedule and provide myself with excessive amounts of free time while still finishing a full school load. And then I had nothing to do with all that free time. Because what are you very often lacking when it comes to homeschooling? Extracurriculars and a social life. Oh yeah, and then on the back you'd list out your new friends for the year. They put a lot of lines on that and I almost never filled them up. Oh, 3rd grade, there's no one listed. No new friends that year. Now, to be fair, my mom did her best to provide us with elective courses throughout our schooling. Like I mentioned, we had art class every single year. I did a course in creative writing and one in calligraphy. We were required to learn typing with good old Mavis Beacon. You could also argue that we had a constantly running, though informal, home ec class, as learning to cook and sew and craft and garden was just a staple of our home life. But with 7 kids in the family, we did not have much of a budget for outside of the home extracurriculars. My mom was also really particular about the amount of time she spent driving us around. She did not like driving, and she did like all of us being at home. Basically, we were each allowed to take one class, to do one extracurricular. And if you were a girl, that class was ballet. Yeah, unfortunately we weren't given a lot of options there until later in life when there were fewer kids at home and more kids old enough to drive themselves. Like, yes, the one class thing was a financial consideration, and that's completely understandable. The only ballet thing was more about the amount of time spent on the road. I even was quite frequently split between 2 levels at our dance studio. For instance, I would take Ballet 2 on Mondays and Ballet 3 on Thursdays, so that my younger sister and I could be dropped off and picked up at the same time. Also, the reason that ballet was the focus was just because my grandmother was a ballerina when she was young and a ballet teacher during my childhood. Although she lived in a different state, so we didn't actually get to take classes from her. If you've seen some of my videos on the main channel, you may be aware that I am the type of person who wants to try everything. Everything in the whole wide world, with very few exceptions. So it was frustrating to me as a kid that my opportunities to gain extracurricular skills were so limited. Even though I understood the lack of time or money due to our situation, I was also aware that in public school, classes like choir, band, orchestra, woodshop, debate, and theater were more readily available options. I was aware of what I was missing out on by being homeschooled. Theater was the tough one for me, especially in high school. Though there actually was a local homeschool theater group, as well as community theater programs that I could have auditioned for, we either couldn't afford the class fees or my mom just wasn't willing to drive me to nightly rehearsals. I spent high school pushing my way through extra academic classes so that once I got to college, I would have less math and history and more acting and costume design. I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself in college to make up for the previous 4 years. Oh, we did do a play with the homeschool group 1 year. I was apparently in 1st grade. No wonder I barely remember that. We did do a play 1 year. I think everyone in our family was cast in it, but we were all like pretty small roles. I think one of my sisters had a line, and the rest of us were just like in the ensemble. Oh my god, there's photos from the play in here. I was very young that year. We did randomly do a homeschool choir group just for 1 year. I cannot remember why we got into that or why we left, although I do recall that it was a friend's mom who drove us to rehearsals, so it was likely through their family. And that's a big thing to consider when it comes to homeschooling. It's not that you don't have the same opportunities for extracurricular education out there. You can take courses in so many things from standalone studios, and homeschool co-ops often have structured groups for things like choir, band, drama, and sports. But there's definitely more effort required for these things, not only because you have to pay for them out of pocket, but also because they aren't confined to the school grounds where students are already spending the bulk of 5 days a week. I don't use the term regret lightly, because I prefer not to regret anything in life. It's kind of a useless emotion in my opinion. But the reality is that yes, I do regret being homeschooled in this one area. I don't regret the academic education that I got. I think that worked out pretty well for me. I don't regret not having a social life as a kid, probably because I still don't have one as an adult. I do regret having so much time at my disposal and yet not being able to use that time to learn and try and experience things that I was interested in or even passionate about beyond a typical academic education. This is just a fun little insight on how we were raised and my mother's opinion. On the back here it says, "When I grow up, I want to be." So each year you could write down what you wanted to be when you grew up. And how long do I have mother written on there? Mother. Ooh. I rebelled by 4th grade, y'all. We were kind of required to write mother because my mother expected all of us to grow up and become mothers. But you can see me branch out. 1st grade, I marked school teacher for the first time. 2nd grade, 2nd grade, I wanted to be an Olympic diver and a florist. We did watch the Olympics every year, and I've always liked heights and water. So yeah, diving. But again, something I was never able to even really try. Although, another thing I forgot, we did take swimming lessons all the way up until about 6th grade. We actually took swimming lessons at the community college, so that was another extracurricular we had. 3rd grade, I'm still on a florist or a diver swimmer. Florist was because one of the jobs my mom had before she got married was a florist, and she really liked it, and so, you know, I was young enough that this was still my copycat stage. Yeah, but 4th grade is when I actually branched out. I have selected nothing, and I have written no mother. There is no mother on here. I wanted to be an orca trainer. We'd gone to SeaWorld that year. 5th grade, branched out slightly. I believe we'd also gone to a zoo that year. Wanted to be a tiger or an orca trainer. Yes, and then 6th grade, I had a lot of dreams. Model, fashion designer, nanny, interior decorator, food preparator. Why did I write food preparator instead of like chef? I think what I wanted to do was like food photography, basically. Like I wanted to like make the food for ads or for photos and stuff like that. So it wasn't actually chef. Once you get into 7th grade, they stopped asking what you want to be when you grow up. Just like the extracurriculars require extra effort for homeschooled families, so too do the social skills. The options are still out there. Clubs and groups and organizations that your kids can be a part of outside of the public school institution. Taking extracurricular classes is further exposure to a variety of peers, although I would argue from experience that this isn't the greatest benefit to a kid's social life. You typically don't have a lot of time within a class structure to really get to know someone, especially if you're shy, is what we called it back then. There's also homeschool groups. They're often location-based, so they might encompass a city and the surrounding suburbs, but they are in no way, shape, or form a requirement of homeschooling. You have to choose to join them. We technically were a part of one. I could not tell you who else was in it because we rarely did activities with them. One of their purposes of existence was coordinating field trips, and I do recall going to a dairy farm with them one time. That's it. Because our own family made a decent-sized group in itself, my mom would actually plan and coordinate field trips just for us. We went to a Mrs. Baird's bread factory, we toured a local fire station, we frequently visited the Dallas Arboretum. Kindergarten, Mrs. Baird's bakery. Y'all, I remember touring the bakery really well. And that was me in kindergarten? How old are you in kindergarten? 6. 6 years old, and I remember that so distinctly. The smell of the rising rooms, the proofing rooms, and they let us try potato bread, and I'd never had that before. Oh, there's the Dairy Museum, though. I was in 8th grade. I do remember being, like, a little too old and a little over it. Choir program. I'm confirming all of my memories here. In 3rd grade was when we apparently did the choir program. My God, I thought I was like 12 when we did that. But there was one homeschool group function we took part in every single year without fail. The World's Fair. For this event, each family would sign up and claim a country, and then they would have to make a presentation on that country, their history and their culture. And on the night of the event, we would all come set up our presentations in usually like a rented church hall or something, and then you'd wander around and look at everybody's work. It was common to provide a food from your selected country, so I enjoyed this event because I enjoyed food. Our family did New Zealand one year because that's where my grandmother was from, and we made pavlova and lamb, so like, there was often pretty good food. And then one year we did America during World War II, and we made this massive vat a victory stew, which was like one of the rations recipes using vegetables like turnips and stuff. No one liked it, and we took so much of it back home with us at the end. And then we were required to eat all of it ourselves because we did not waste food in our home. I'm not sure why this was the one event that my mom booked for us every year. She just seemed to really enjoy it, and it gave us the opportunity to not only do a presentation like that, but also a group project where a 12th grader and a 1st grader had to work together somehow because your class consisted of 7 people of very different ages. Oh look! World's Fair, New Zealand. That was when I was in 3rd grade. So at the World's Fair, they would make little passports, and that was another thing, is everyone would get a stamp to go with their country. And then as you walked around, you'd get your passport stamped. It was a fun little event. Oh, look at that. And World's Fair, World War II. That was the year of the victory stew. Other than the good old World's Fair though, the main reasons we stayed registered with the homeschool group were prom and graduation. Yep, there's a homeschool prom. It totally slaps. Just kidding, I have no frame of reference for how good or not homeschool prom was, having never been to a non-homeschool prom. But I do have rather mixed memories of my experiences. In our family, you were allowed to go to prom twice during high school. You would go the year that you graduated, and then you also got to accompany your older sibling when they graduated. So I got to go in 10th grade when my brother was in 12th. They'd rent out a hotel ballroom, there was a full dinner served, there was always a very thorough theme, though I don't remember what it was that year. And there were numerous parents there as chaperones, as well as like a viewing area they set up where parents who had volunteered in some other way, because all parents were required to volunteer in order to make this event happen, could just show up and watch their kids go to prom. I found that a bit weird. My parents usually chaperoned. 10th grade prom, I don't remember being super fun for me. Likely because I didn't know any other homeschool kids because we never spent time with them. However, I anticipated this for my 12th grade prom and invited my best high school friend who was not homeschooled to come with me. The theme was around the world. I liked my dress a lot more. We went early and ran around the hotel before getting ready in a random bathroom. I had someone to talk to and dance with, and by 11 o'clock at night, we were holed up in the ballroom bathroom painting our toenails. So yeah, all around a lot more fun. Homeschool proms covered a pretty big area, so you'd actually have hundreds of students attending these things. But homeschool graduation ceremonies were a little more localized, with maybe like 15 to 30 students graduating. They were usually held in a church with a reception in the lobby afterwards where you'd set up presentations on the life of the graduate. So awkward. Oh, but the most awkward part, awkward for me, I'm sure other people absolutely loved it, was that during the course of the ceremony, each graduate would get a personal slideshow of pictures from their entire life, infancy to young adulthood, that would play for all to see. This would be followed up by like a voice message from our parents telling us that they're proud of us and stuff. It was very sweet, but it was also very presentational and very in front of an audience and rather uncomfy for me personally. Oh my god, I'd forgotten these. My mom had these little stacks of papers, I don't know, like notes, and she'd give you one whenever you made a 100 on a test, and we would like post them up. We each had like a section of the wall, and we'd stick all of our little yay, you got a 100 up there. She really did try to make sure that she was like celebrating our academic achievements. Stickers, yep. We got sticker rewards for something. We got ribbons at the end of every year. I don't really know why. Again, she just liked to celebrate our progress, which is great. She'd give out awards for other things. This one, I was in 7th grade. I got an award for great attitude. So you'd get a paper and you'd stick it on the wall. But also this one came with 2 hours of computer time. Really a luxury. Honestly, the weirdest part of the transition from homeschooling to my first public school class, although in my case that was a college course, was not the addition of fellow students, but rather the addition of a teacher. Having spent 12 years finding my own way to meet educational expectations, I was lightly boggled that I was now expected to sit in a room for an hour while someone talked at me about a subject. The first time a teacher assigned a reading from the textbook, I did it because reading was what school was for me. And then I showed up to class and they proceeded to lecture all the same information at us, and I was very confused. I already read the book. Why are you repeating all of the information? Like, just test me and let's be done with it. Luckily, the first two courses that I took, biology and chemistry at the same time, because yeah, why not, were taught in the most opposite ways possible, which allowed me to gain a wider view of the normal learning experience quite quickly. My biology teacher was great. Hands-on, desks in a circle, let's get to know each other, very interactive assignments, all that good stuff. She made the classroom feel worthwhile. My chemistry teacher, on the other hand, had been at this for far too long and would stand in front of the classroom lecturing in a monotone the exact same information that was already in the book, with maybe a few slides for visual aid, before getting distracted by a rant on airport security that would last a full 10 minutes. Most of his class dropped out. But this experience made me realize that for the next 4 years, I would be dealing with a range of teachers and teaching styles, and if I wanted to continue to find my own way to meet educational expectations, I'd probably have to get a little more creative. And that's honestly the main reason I don't regret being homeschooled. It taught me to learn by myself, on my own time, in the method that works best for me. My mom didn't adapt her educational style for the individuality of each child, but I was able to adapt it for myself anyway. Oh Lord, by 11th grade I was getting a little sassy. Every year it has like a space to write down who your teachers were, and it always just says mother. But by 11th year, I wrote, the book's mother and me. I was like, I'm gonna get some credit here for teaching myself. Thank you very much. I learned to manage my time and my schedule on my own, to challenge myself, to set goals, to maximize efficiency, and to prioritize practicality. Do I remember 90% of what I learned in school? No, who does? I'd guess like 45% tops. But am I still continually benefited by the skills that I gained in order to complete school? 100%, absolutely. Anyway, yeah. So that's that. Lots of work, y'all. Lots of work in this tub. Kind of begging the question, do I need all this still? I don't know, it's 13 years of my life, so it kind of feels worthwhile to hold on to. But I can't really think of why. This has reminded me, even more so than my memory had it, of how much effort and attention my mom gave to homeschooling us. Like, I do have to give her props. I said so many times here that she didn't adapt her styles to each individual child and that homeschooling maybe wasn't the best for all of us. But I do have to acknowledge that she really put a lot of effort into this, and she really did the best that she could to make sure that we had a good education at home. So good for her. I do appreciate that. I've just realized in the telling of this story that apparently my priority in academic education was always to meet expectations rather than to actually learn information. We don't have time to unpack that. Embroidery update. Oh, I feel like it's so hard to see the colors on camera, but there is so much thread on this thing. This might actually be the last time it shows up on the second channel. Keep an eye out on the main channel for it. Look at that baby boy. Oh, yes. Upside downies. All the various... My voice just cut out there. Let me just solve that with coffee. Who's out there? Who's out there? Theater socks. Oh, great. It's yard work time. There's not enough purple on here. I need more purple. There was glitter in that one. Oh, baby, I'm gonna pay. Farts.